All right, we're live on YouTube, just so everyone knows.
Change the camera if you want. Get outlet.
Right ahead. That echo is going to be an issue, right?
Yeah, so go into your browser and mute that one. Yeah. There we go. That should work.
Okay.
And now, go back to Zoom. So you have the owl option now. Then, yeah, but now go to video and change it to video too. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Grand County Budget Advisory Board to order. It is 2:02 p.m. today on September 21st of 2023. Here present are Budget Advisory Board members Chris Kaufman, Quinn Hall, myself, Gabriel Wojtek, Bill Winfield, Renee Baker, and Kevin Walker. And also present, we have Julie Neiman, who will be presenting for this Family Support Center. First up. Moving right along to action items. Number one on our agenda is approval of minutes from September 14th, 2023. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
And do I have a second?
I'll
second. All right, we have a motion by Baker, second by Hall. All those voting in favor to approve the minutes, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 6-0. Shaylee Bryant, also on the Budget Advisory Board, she said she's going to try to participate via Zoom today, just to make that clear. Before moving on to discussion, I should probably clear the air on the inclusion of Quinn Hall, right, and who works in County Commission Administration, as now a official voting member of the Budget Advisory Board. The County Commission at this last Tuesday's meeting, in order to address the immediate 2023 vacancy, appointed Quinn Hall to a modified term on this board to expire on December 31st, 2023. And to do so, there was a repeal and replace of the ordinance governing the Budget Advisory Board, just in order to comply with, to make clear that we weren't complying with a standard appointment process for a board such as this, but it was clearly meant in this case to be a temporary appointment for someone who has background and experience with the Grand County budget to be involved on the spot. We did receive really valuable feedback from Board Member Bryant last week about leaving the door open for a wider discussion about the potential for that board appointment in a future budget season, especially the possibility of another citizen like herself to be involved with that, which I think is really valuable feedback will be worth talking about. And of course, all members of the public, if you are listening back to this recording or listening now over YouTube, you're always welcome to be welcome here in the chambers for the meeting, provide questions as needed, or even email myself, gwojtek@grandcountyutah.net, if you have any particular questions about things that you are observing in the board meeting. Yeah, the whole purpose of this board is to provide transparency and openness to the public, and we want to do that to the best of our ability. So with that being said, we will move right forward into presentations and discussions. The first department presentation that we have scheduled is the Family Support Center, and I have here the director of the Family Support Center, Julie Neiman. Thanks for being here with us today.
To be here.
So I got logged out of that. Okay. I'm going to be able to go back in. Interesting.
I'm sure we'll get back into yourself.
Is it going to kick me out of YouTube though, I wonder?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't know if I want, oh, it's signed out. Okay. I'm just going to get into my email real quick to pull up a supporting document that I wanted to use to illustrate the Family Support Center budget. Brother. All right, so just gonna open up Family Support Center budget here. We're gonna start with revenue as we typically do. So the Family Support Center has two main grant funding sources that support its operations. And as you can see here, here's a brief historical representation of that, going back from actuals in 2021, 2022. You can see that there are these funding sources here that have been regularly present to support the Family Support Center.
Is it possible to make that any bigger?
It is not, yeah. Is it in your experience in watching virtually, is this relatively hard to see? Or
Well,
I guess you can
when you're
zoom.
watching virtual, I assume you can just locally zoom your screen in.
Right,
Usually what I
right.
do.
Yeah,
You could control scroll and see what happens.
I mean, what if you just make the whole window narrower?
yeah.
No, we've had issues in the past. I don't think we've ever been able to get the advantage itself, like the budget part of it, to zoom in. We've been able to get like the window to zoom in and make the top buttons bigger, but not actually the numbers, so.
Okay.
So we have one revenue line titled grant proceeds, and that's what had been TANF and is now referred to as DHS. And then we have another state, and these are both state grants. The other is DHHS. It's kind of a sick joke that they have such a similar name. We call DHHS also GovBud. Julie, did you want to give a brief overview of any difference between those two funding sources, other than one is a little bit bigger than the other? One is 123,000, the other is 101,000, and both of those numbers are being carried over into the 24 request.
Mm-hmm. And the DHHS, the GovBud, is granted every year. The DHS Crisis Nursery goes for a period of 5 years, and that ends in 24.
Okay.
So, and the amounts are, since I've been here, the same. So
And
as last year.
we also, it's still September, but we know what these numbers are going to be because these actually both operate on a fiscal year. So we are in process in these cycles, and that's how we budget for these. We sort of budget on that lag with the fiscal year and the calendar year county budget.
Can I add also
Please.
that both of those grants are on a fiscal year that begins in July
Mhm.
and ends in June of the following year.
Yep. There's also a little revenue here that we budget for expense reimbursement, and that's associated with the Family Support Center of Utah. Is that a nonprofit organization that exists to support local FSC?
And that is the association receives all of the centers around Utah receive this DHHS GovBud Yes.
And then as far as revenue goes, we'll also see that there's this line here, county contribution. So essentially, the Family Support Center operates primarily through these two grant funding sources, and whatever these two grant funding sources aren't able to fully fund as far as the center goes, there is this county contribution here that makes up the balance, and that does come from the general fund. That number hasn't been put in yet here as an initial request, mainly because we don't have finalized compensation figures for the center. And so once we have those, we'll know exactly what that contribution is, and that can be addressed when we look at general non-department transfers, and at a future budget advisory board meeting, it will be natural to circle back to what that number is once compensation figures are complete. Although with the, is there going to be any increase in staffing at the Family Support Center?
We just, well, we've offered 2 on-call positions.
Okay,
I'll note on that, the on-call positions are somewhat like our part-time, where we necessarily aren't going to increase the number of hours that we generally budget for, but there are hopefully 2 new employees coming on to handle some of those hours as they pop up.
okay. So since the grant funding remained the same, and there will be natural increases in compensation as the commission might consider things like cost of a living adjustments and then other staffing adjustments, those would be the factors that would, in this case, contribute to what that county contribution number would ultimately be. So there's 2 expenditure accounts associated with the Family Support Center, and they're both associated with the 2 grants. We have one that's titled Family Support Center, that is DHS, and then we have one that's titled DHHS, for the Gut Bud grant. And what I wanted to do, actually, in order to best illustrate how we come up with these expense requests here, as you can see for DHS, we have these numbers, these lines filled in with the 24 request. And I thought it would be appropriate to illustrate to the board and to the public that these numbers are directly linked with the operational costs that these grants cover, that these approved grants covered. So there is an amount of salary and benefits that the grants do help support, and I have that illustrated here. It's not built into the request yet, but it just as a way of illustrating the amount of the salary and benefits that are covered by the grant, and then any other costs associated in the expenses associated with the operation of the center. For example, 500 for travel transportation, 10,000 for utilities, 1,215 for communications, so on and so forth. Those are mirrored exactly with what is filled in here for regarding expenses, the expense request for 2024. And so what we're seeing here is that the day-to-day operational costs of the center are covered by the grants, and the county contribution is really solely used to fill in on the compensation for the staff at the Family Support Center. Let's see, some changes in here. There are a couple changes. I see that last year there was 5,500 in this grant for travel, and it's only 500. Was there less travel approved for this year, or was it covered by your other grants, or?
Covered by the grants, yeah.
Okay.
So we reduced that.
Okay. And then you all will see that I went ahead and consolidated utilities. It had been broken out in the past. It doesn't mean that we still don't have accounting for each of these lines based on opening up this. We can always open up the utilities transaction details and see what was paid to whom. But because the grant pays out $10,000 for these variety of utilities, I think, as the finance officer now, and for the purposes of my office and Julie's office helping with grant tracking purposes, I think that consolidating those lines into a general utilities is perfectly suitable in this case. Other than that, there aren't any dramatic changes other than some reductions in this budget. So I think we can probably move on. Are there any questions up to this point? All right, and then TANF there was TANF in here, and my understanding is TANF, that's temporary assistance for needy families. That was, that contract ended with the state, and then it was replaced by a program from the governor's office. Is there any other
Yeah,
details about that?
and so TANF was, from my understanding, up to last year, the end of last fiscal year. And then we were granted this GovBud ongoing.
Okay.
So that took the place of TANF. Not that TANF's not still out there. It's just we don't receive
Right.
funding from TANF.
And so in order to illustrate that, I'll just open this up and show that on a historical level, this DHHS had largely not been used 18, 19, 20, and going past, and it just became active in 2022 because there was this TANF funding source that we used, and we created these accounts last year. So looking at this budget, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and open up this summary that was associated with the grant documents for DHHS to display the amounts that are the approved expenses that are to be reimbursed through this DHHS GovBud grant, which are mirrored exactly in the referenced lines here, including the contributions, the detail that I'm providing regarding the contributions for grants for salaries and benefits. Is there anything notable about these expense requests? It looks like they're all the same or even reduced. Did you have any?
Yeah, I did this to go through the reallocation with the association to reduce, to be able to add a little more to the salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
It wasn't much, but it wasn't a good amount. So that's why there's a reduction for this upcoming fiscal year.
Great, yeah, so like Julie mentioned, in both grants, we really saw that all of the operational expense requests either came in at the same or slightly reduced, because both grants, she managed to have them reallocated to expenses related to salaries and benefits. Any questions from the board or the public?
No, I'll give a quick just salary and benefits update. Still working with Casell to get those into there. There's just some slight issue with the version of Advantage that we're using, so we'll get there. My hope is to have that by the next meeting. But I think when we do a position overview at the end, we can also go back into any budget that we might have a question on salaries and benefits. So.
Thank you, Personnel Services Director Baker.
Sure.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on in department presentations, the second department that we have to present today is the Weeds Department. Are there any other official terminology we use to describe the Weeds Department, or is that the Grand County Weeds Department?
Sometimes also noxious weeds department.
Noxious Weeds
Or throw in
Department.
an extra one, yeah.
Yeah, there's some budget lines that say like biological weed control. I've seen that term thrown around. Just curious, I want to use the right term.
Yeah, biological weed control is just like a sub-genre of the work we do. So
Uh-huh.
it's our department. But, yeah, weeds department.
Cool. All right, as always, we will start with the revenues associated with the Weeds Department. And in this case, in Fund 25, titled Miscellaneous Grants, that is where the grant funding received to support the biological weed control is placed in this 253647. You can see a brief historical record of the grant funding received in 21 and 22, in addition to the actual so far received this year. Oops, I had written a different description in that line to better describe how we came up with the request number here, which I will describe now. So what we're coming in for projected revenues through grant funding for the Weed Department is $67,875. And that is derived Izzy made a nice spreadsheet to describe her the grant overviews that support the weeds department. Just open up fiscal year 2023. I think this is the one that best illustrates the current state of affairs. So right now we are in the fiscal year 24 grant cycle. Is that correct? That started in July. And so that number that we're projecting for revenues for the weeds department is 50% of the approved amount for fiscal year 24. So that's $135,750 times 50% comes out to this figure right here. And that is my effort to follow the pattern of what had been done previously in setting this budgeted number. It's basically the current fiscal year that is already underway is split in half. And that has to do with historically how much we've actually sort of invoiced from the grants. It seems like it's been pretty close to 50%. And so that's why we've set it there. So to illustrate fiscal year 22, which ended in June of this year, there were grants approved in the amount of 122,000, and we invoiced for reimbursement 62,400. Is that correct? Is that, yeah? Yeah. And is there a particular explanation why that, like, if we were granted this much, why didn't we invoice and get reimbursed that much? Yeah.
Totally. So we've had a shortage of employees, especially grant funded employees. So the majority of the funds that we did not use were just an absence of grant funded employees. So that's actually the majority of what I applied for is for wages. And so what we would end up charging for is just equipment use and the few wages that we did.
Okay. And you do have a grant funded full-time position that you hadn't had for a while this year. And I think if we go back to this sheet here, I believe it's well displayed in the fact that we've invoiced, relative to the previous cycle where there were 62,000 invoiced. This year so far, we have 83,000 invoiced, and I think that reflects the presence of that new, or that grant funded position. I'm still in the process of really teasing this out and figuring out how to best display it in the budget, but I think that's the best I can do at the moment. Are there any questions or concerns about that I could follow up on, perhaps?
I guess I am kind of confused. So what's the overall amount the department spent the last couple of years?
In terms of grants or?
Just overall, I mean, is the county also contributing money?
Yeah, we'll get into the expenses next year.
And to answer that maybe a little bit, Kevin, is that the county's always contributed, at least to the directors and to the lead techs salary and benefits. That's never been grant funded as well. So
okay.
there is a portion of county contribution that's always been in the general fund.
And maybe we can talk about, once we get to the expenses, we can talk about how the grants support the general operations and expenses of the weed department. Oh boy, yes, please. All right. So we have some good narrative offered here by Izzy with regards to the budget for the weed control department. And this is the expense side that's kept in the general fund. That is 1042.52. And so here we go along here. We'll talk about any changes here majorly. Statutorily required noticing is satisfied by the internet, and there were some previously some newspaper ads that were coded to this line were reallocated to the public education expense line. So that's actually been zeroed out at this point. Able to reduce some costs related to noticing. For travel, we have here described a number of specific conferences that the weed department attends, and there's a breakout associated with the costs that are related directly to that number request. Any comments on your conferences or things? Any new conferences, or these are just the ones that you've regularly attended? Just going down the list here to see anything that's different. We have cell phone allowance. So that is a little bit up to account for the potential for additional grant funded positions that you're hoping to bring on.
Hopefully I'll have at least 3 members of staff for the majority of the year.
Okay. And so we're going to go ahead for now and budget for those cell phone allowances to be included in the budget. And if it seems like those are approved for your department, we'll leave them in. And if not, we will still have time to remove them. All the other lines are the same. Let's see, we have a different one here for capital equipment. There's a number in there for enterprise lease. If y'all will see that there was 6,700 budgeted in 2023 with 0 actually expended, and that's been increased to 9,000 to reflect the updated lease cost for a flatbed truck, which your department currently does not have but needs. And how long have you had that on request?
As many zeros as we have there.
So make do with what you have. Thank you for that. And hopefully we can get you the equipment that you need to do your job. Inventory, it looks like there are a couple scheduled computer replacements per the information technology department, as well as some additional office material, desks and shelves that will be associated with new staff and other general office needs that you have. Okay. We talked a little bit before how we moved some things over that would result in an increase in 860, some calendar printing, weed guides, and those newspaper ads we talked about. What kind of things do you publish in the newspaper related to the weeds department?
We hope to publish more about volunteer events or the Go Tech Gala or just any sort of public events that people could go to.
Great. And then training, let's see, 3,600 was budgeted in 23. The request is down to 3,100. And there is a breakout here describing where exactly that number comes from. Usually in the training line, that's where we allocate, or that's where we code the expenses related to the costs associated with conferences and trainings. So the travel line up here, and this is just kind of a reminder, I'll probably say every budget meeting, the travel line here accounts for per diem, lodging, and other travel expenses associated with conferences. And in training, we put at the actual registration fees. And then also in addition to those, there's some certifications and classes that the weeds department needs to keep up on. Swiftwater Rescue, that's because you do some river trips associated with your weed control.
Yes, we'll be in wastewater end of October for a whole week. Down Russian Olive
Russian Olive.
and other.
So in terms of that question about, as we can see here, this is kind of useful to have this number up here because it gives us an idea of what the baseline operations are of the department without not accounting for salaries and benefits. I guess if we're talking about how much the county contributes typically to the operation of the weeds department compared to the grants, would you say it's more that the grants provide supplemental funding to the operations of the weeds department rather than in a case like we just saw the Family Support Center where it's sort of primarily grant funded and then the county makes up sort of the difference? Would you say that that's kind of accurate way of putting it?
Yes, in terms of like equipment and like capital needs, in terms of wages, like for seasonal positions, I would say that's fully grant.
Okay. Yeah.
Answer the question, okay.
Yeah. So what you said was like capital needs and equipment and seasonal staffing is typically sort of, that's where the grant sort of comes in.
Yeah, seasonal
Okay.
and then actual like operations
Okay.
grant, and everything else would be counted.
Got it. But so when you buy chemicals and tools and things,
It's kind of a toss-up. I put it in the county budget, because sometimes I can't always get it through a grant. The grants that are available to us reflect almost directly with the actual on the ground work. They don't always, they're not always able to pay for the background work that happens. So, but yeah, it's kind of like a supplemental herbicide. We get it approved through a grant. And I feel like I'm that one.
No, that's,
So is there a state mandate for each county to have a noxious waste department?
and so we'll see here,
But there's no, these grants, are they from the state or are they from federal agencies?
They are a mix of all of them. So we get grants from Utah Department of Agriculture, and then we have contracts with Bureau of Land Management and State DNR. But it's variable.
and I think as a way to sort of put into context what the county contribution is, I think if we went back here to, oops, wrong one. If we went back here to miscellaneous revenue and we looked at 21 and 22, 78 and 68 in those two respective years. And then we went back to the weed control operations cost in 21 and 22 being 168 and 165. So there's about a $100,000 differential in there that the county makes up. And that's primary, yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments from the board or the public at this point?
I have one question. Where's your office?
So at the recycling center.
Oh, is it? Okay, thank
The
you.
old road shed.
And
What's
you-
that?
The old road shed.
And you share a building with the Moab Mosquito Abatement District?
Share an office. And walls.
Izzy, I'm very vaguely remembering something last year about adding to the building or remodeling the building, and there was some funding discussion last year. I don't think we got further than that. Is there?
My understanding is that no actual action has been taken, and we're hoping to maybe start officially talking about it, maybe
Okay.
forming a committee or something, but nothing's happened.
Okay, all right.
I suggested to Izzy that conversation be brought up, like, and perhaps a committee formed with the mosquito abatement district and the weeds department combined and sort of work out, perhaps thinking outside of the box ways to meet the facility needs for those two organizations in the most cost-effective and sort of durable way possible. It's definitely, it's not something that I think is appropriate at this point to budget in money for without a real plan for it, I think.
Yeah.
And so are you in that old office trailer that the landfill people used to use, or?
No, we're in a conventional like stick built building next to the trailers that are currently being used by solid waste.
All right,
Yeah, it's on the north side of the old road shed. And I will say, having been out there, it is in sort of need of some improvements, both the storage and maintenance facility and the office.
Yeah, we find snakes in our office and lizards. Yeah, it's exciting, but
Well, thanks for all the important work you do to control noxious weeds in Grand County.
thank you.
And I believe that's all for now. You're welcome to hang around if you want. All right, so next up in the agenda is we have the Grand County Treasurer's Department. And we have from the Budget Advisory Board, the Grand County Treasurer, Christopher Kaufman. I've got pulled up here the 2024 budget requests for the Treasurer's Department. Chris, do you want to go ahead and
Sure.
explain any changes from what we approved in 2023 from the requests we have here displayed for 2024?
Sure. Jump in for 1 second. Do you want this screen shared on?
Oh,
YouTube?
shucks, thanks for reminding me about that.
So it's not, you
Yeah.
can share the screen, yeah. Right now, everybody's just seeing us.
I'm gonna do screen. Thanks, Quinn. All right.
Must be a lot of people watching me. Got a lot of complaints on it.
I might, yeah, okay, thank you.
This should be pretty quick and easy. I might have the smallest, easiest budget in the county, because there's just myself and my chief deputy. Again, we'll just be talking about non-compensation numbers here. My budget request is about 1,500 over the budget request from the prior year, a little bit under my actuals from 2022. And for the most part, I'm just doing a few inflationary adjustments. There's no new employees or new projects or new equipment or inventory items. The printing and mailing costs have gone up a lot in the last couple of years. We were actually able to keep those pretty steady for a while and even decrease them for a couple of years as we did some email tax notices and some other things to try to save costs there. But with the post office increasing rates, it's been going up. And so it's been difficult because I do my budgeting now, and then my largest expense, which is the tax bill, happens, next month. And so I've always been a couple years behind on those. And so this year I tried to factor in 2 years worth of increases because it just seems like they're increasing the rates every year a little bit. And so that's under the mailing and postage, why that has gone up. Subscriptions and memberships went down since the Times Independent is free now. Public notices I increased a little bit. I'm using that to advertise the tax relief programs primarily to folks in the county, and that does seem to have helped. We've been getting more people applying for those. Travel expenses are a bit higher than my actuals because I hope to make it to all 3 of my conferences this year. The last several years I haven't gone to all of them. The office supplies and expenses are pretty flat. Payment fees are also going up just a little bit. We allow people to pay online for free, even though it costs us a little bit when they do a one-time e-check, and that's what those costs are for there. I'm also covering the cost for payment fees that are going to the assessor's office to pay personal property taxes. It's a small amount. It's just easier for us to have one bill. Professional services is flat, cell phone amount is flat, and the schooling expense has gone up just because the cost of conferences have increased. And yeah, no inventory needs this year. We should have a couple of years before we need new computers, and that's about it.
And of course, we didn't plan to really discuss revenue projections associated with property tax collections, but we will certainly cover that, and that's a discussion that I hope you will lead. As far as revenues associated with this department. Any questions for the treasurer? Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have on the schedule is Sand Flats Recreation Area. Let's see, is Andrea? Maybe we could see if we can get Andrea in the mix. Let's see her in the. Maybe she's waiting outside. Some people are real polite. We've been pretty breezy about this so far, so. I can actually get started because Andrea prepares this very extensive narrative document that's associated with her budget. So Andrea Brand is the director. I'm sure we'll get to meet her soon. We'll open up Sand Flats. It's its own fund because it is an enterprise fund. So we'll let Andrea describe that aspect of Sand Flat. Basically that it is self-funded through use fees. And Andrea just gave a really great presentation in the county commission meeting. So any member of the public or the board that is curious about the current ongoing operations up at Sand Flats, or if you refer to the video from the 9/19 commission meeting for that detail. That ended up being revenue for her. We'll talk about it. So as far as the expenses go here, these are the numbers here that reflect in this narrative document that Andrea prepared for us. So I wish that this doesn't show what it was approved last year, but we'll just go through here real quick.
Hey, Gabe.
Yeah.
Can you hit that plus sign that's down at the bottom?
Good job. There we go.
Hey,
Thank you.
that's better.
That's fine.
Thanks. We do it again? One more? Why not? There we go. So there's costs associated with, let's see. We're not gonna talk about salary, overtime and benefits yet at this stage.
I'll make a little note about that, though. Sandflats is hoping to bring back their apprentices, which we haven't had in the last couple of years due to COVID. Those are apprentice level, usually high school students who come in and work, I think generally just the fall season. So the cost is minimal, but we might see a slight increase due to that.
Thank you. Subscriptions for the Adobe Suite software. So they produce in-house a number of print material, brochures, educational information, and then also signage associated inside the park. And they have a staff member that uses the Adobe Suite design software. And so that 1,100 is placed into that expense line. 500 for public notices, 1,000 for travel. For a department of their size, I would say that that's a pretty limited amount. And again, I want to just reiterate, as I said before at the beginning of this department presentation, when we look at the expenses for Sandflats, ultimately we do, it's important to keep in mind that this is an enterprise fund. So Andrea does a great job. She has for years now operating the Sandflats with great fiscal responsibility and keeping her expenses in line with how much she can expect to receive in fees collected from use at the park. So these expenses are well accounted for in what she hopes to receive. Vehicle maintenance, I believe that's all the vehicles they used up there to maintain the park. Building grounds and maintenance at 4,000. Let's see. So this number, I put in 7,000 into the budget, but there's a possibility of reducing the requested utilities in 2024 to 5,400, and that's because Sandflats Recreation Area's administrative offices are down here on 100 North near the county campus, and they share that building with Grand County Active Trails and Transportation. So there is a possibility that line, it seems like a high likelihood that this line will actually be set to 5,400 to account for the Trails and Transportation's contribution towards that building's utilities. I'm keeping it at 7,000 now with, just because if that, for whatever reason, didn't end up happening, I wouldn't want to leave this under budgeted. Back to this. Contract professional services, I wonder if there's any, we didn't add any detail. I don't have any further narrative to come up with there. Maybe there's a way we can see what's different and then refer back to Andrea's narrative. That might be a better way of doing this. Lease payment vehicles, 16,000 was approved in 23 and 24,000 is approved in 24. We could probably assume that might be an extra. There's 3 fleet vehicles. That presumably is due to the addition of a lease vehicle up there at the park. It looks like contract toilet services. I'll go ahead there and enter that in. Oops, that's too much, huh? That's for the, I believe that's with Zunich Brothers for the regular cleaning out of the pit toilets up at Sandflats. There's an annual contribution that Sandflats makes to search and rescue to account for search and rescue services provided within the Sandflats recreation area boundaries. I did talk with, this 10,000 number has stayed relatively flat historically. Let's see, what number is that? 330. As you can see, looking back, it stayed pretty flat at 10,000. And I have talked with with Andrea about potentially recalculating that number. Because she does run an enterprise fund and these funds come from those fees. And if perhaps their search and rescue might be due an increased allocation from Sand Flats, because otherwise search and rescue is funded by the general fund. So it would be a way to offset those general fund expenses if Sand Flats were able to make an increased contribution to search and rescue. And Andrea is definitely open to that. She doesn't have resistance to contributing more to SAR. So
Do we need to do anything more to make sure it actually happens?
yeah,
Not being resistant isn't the same as yes, it's gonna happen.
let's make sure when Andrea comes in, let's make sure to ask her about that. I think that would be a good next step. Let's see, the rest of these lines, looks like there's a number here. There's a number here that are carried over as identical requests from 2023. Small reduction in printing and publishing. Insurance and supplies and equipment remain the same. Insurance here applies to auto insurance, which because Sand Flats is its own fund, they pay within the county's auto insurance. That they pay back into the general fund for the auto insurance that we use. But other departments that have a county fleet vehicle don't have this line because it's just within the greater auto insurance line that the county pays out. Capital improvements, that's a big one. And the explanation there is it's mainly grant match funding. There's $250,000 that Andrea is setting aside to contribute to the RAISE grant, which is the effort to extend the paving up at the Sand Flats Road. There's also $120,000 for the RTP match, which I believe refers to the multimodal separated path that is being proposed and getting ready to apply for along the Sand Flats Road, I believe, starting at the Slick Rock Bike Trail and further into the park. I'm not sure exactly how far. Hi,
Hi,
we're already talking about your budget.
I thought I heard Sand Flats.
And then there's an entry booth capital improvement line of 10,000, and that's for repainting the entry booth and then other improvements that are proposed to be made at the entry booth. I know that there was talk about revamping the entry booth altogether, and that's why this year there was 145,000 that was approved in capital improvements, but only 4,000 spent. Andrea, do you want to explain why we approved that budget and then didn't end up spending it? It has to do mainly with that entry booth, correct? Or
Yes.
at least primarily.
Yes, we're not, okay, so when Chris Baird was still here and he worked to amend the budget, we took 55,000 out of that capital improvements and put it toward capital equipment, which is our motorcycle, our e-bike, and those have already been purchased. And then we hope to purchase a Can-Am or something like that, a UTV this fall. And so that's why 55,000 was taken out. And then we're not doing the improvements to the booth because after 2 years of looking at it and talking to the BLM, because we have that Square credit card system, it has just sped everything up. So we are not having the problems. We've had outfitters even say there is no problem now. So if there is a line, the longest people wait is 15 minutes. But that's just a few times, less than 10 times probably a year that we have those kind of lines, and or I would say 10 times in this, 10 times a year. It's very low that happens now, whereas before sometimes it would be 20, 30 minutes, especially during COVID when everyone had to get out of the vehicle and come over to the window. So we don't have that issue. So yeah, we're not gonna bother. And the other thing is Dead Horse Point, as an example, they have over 900,000 visitors and they have one booth. We have 250,000 and we have one booth. So we're not there yet. So
I'm glad that came to light and kind of cured itself. So we didn't go spending a whole bunch of money on a whole new entrance.
I actually spoke to Arches, some folks at Arches, and I'm like, I don't understand. Why do you have these signs that when you're like 500 feet from the booth, it still says an hour wait? or, you know, a half hour wait. They said, well, the issue, this was last year when I asked them, they said, well, the issue was our credit card system. I was like, that's interesting. So this kind of shows that can really speed things up.
Yeah. So we kind of breezed through, Andrea, a lot of the lines. I described some of the ones that had changes, but we sort of just established, I have your narrative open in another window as needed, and we just kind of
Sure.
more or less just passed through the ones that had no change. One item that came up that we wanted your input on, I did explain that you would be considering a recalculation of the contribution to search and rescue and.
Well, my stewardship committee did not vote for any change. I mean, I guess there's still time, obviously. I mean, I don't meet again with them until December. But I hadn't heard back from Brad Hines, and then I did hear back from him earlier this week. And I mean, he said I think he misinterpreted my email to think that we weren't gonna give them the 10.
Okay.
And so I wrote back to him again and said, no, the 10 is fine. We were just maybe considering more, but since my stewardship committee already met, maybe more for the next year. So.
Would you, I think, what time of the month does the stewardship committee meet in December? Is it earlier in the
They
month?
meet like the second Thursday. So
Yeah.
around the, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, whatever that is. When is your,
Well, we don't adopt the final budget. I mean, we have to do some public hearings and things, but still some adjustments to be made. I'm just wondering if you might still be able to have that committee see, or if they actually need to, if there is a requirement for them to.
well, there kind of is in the agreement with the BLM.
Okay.
This Advisory committee that's like their main function is budget and recommendations of course, they are advisory and recommendations to the commission. So.
Do you have a guess? Because I know you have a pretty scientific way of determining based on SAR calls that are fielded and up at Sand Flats. Do you have any kind of guess as to what an update to that contribution could be? Or, I'm sorry, that might be.
No, I don't, because I'd have to talk to Brad. I mean, what he thought. I know that in the past, probably 5 years ago or so, the stewardship committee was wanting to give some more money to search and rescue, and we talked to Jim Webster and he said, we're fine. So he didn't want any at that time, so we didn't bring it up again. I think it was from my looking at the spreadsheet from Nancy May from Search and Rescue that shows all the rescues for like the whole year of 2022. I think 19% of, okay, wait, I'm not sure if it was time though. 19% of their rescues were up at Sand Flats. But I would have to go back through and look at their hours, their labor, and their vehicle use and calculate that deeper to know if it's what that percentage would be. And then talk to Brad to see what they thought, how that contribution may be related to their operations, because I don't know what their budget is. As far as like, okay, you're spending 1/5 of your time. Well, I don't know if it's time or if it's numbers. I have to look back at it.
But still, it sounds like it could be a pretty substantial number of rescues up there.
The thing is, we have to really look at times though, because a lot of them are quick. The ones that are in the Slick Rock and stuff, those are pretty quick.
Okay.
So, I mean, when they go on Porcupine and they're out there forever, technically you're not in Sand Flats, but I have counted those in it. But, once you're on that, out there where most of those big rescues happen, you're not in Sand Flats. They're coming off the whole enchilada and they're just passing through Sand Flats. We're probably not even collecting a fee from them as they go through Sand Flats for that 1.5 miles. So,
So I wonder whether in this budget, we could just plug in some large number there, and then Andrea could do and that will be like a maximum that we approve for contributing to search and rescue.
well, I don't know if I want to plug in a large number. I mean,
15 maybe?
yeah, maybe 15 or something.
Why not more?
Well, I don't know.
Is it safe to say that the board would like Andrea to explore a recalculation of that number to
Sure.
potentially be?
The county puts money in the search and rescue, and it either comes from taxpayers in general, or we can pay some of it from user fees at Sand Flats.
True.
So I think we should pay as much as we possibly can for user fees at Sand Flats, so.
Well, for years we only paid 5, and then, that was a long time ago, and then they upped it to 10. And one year they took 20. to make up for something. That was right about the time I became manager, 2004, they upped it to 20. And then they, thank you, and then they brought it back down to 10, and Jim Webster was fine with that all these years, but yeah, we can
But
revisit
that just
it.
means that the county contribution is large enough for it.
That he
Yeah,
felt that was, yeah,
It doesn't affect his overall budget, it's just a question of where the money comes from.
okay.
Well, I would tend to
Okay.
agree, and I would appreciate if you wouldn't mind sort of doing that investigation as to
Yeah.
how that might be recalculated.
Well, yeah, if Brad had been able to get back to me sooner, I would have had more information for you, but he
no
wasn't
problem.
at his desk, so.
You're fine.
So I finally got back to your email.
So
Okay.
if you ever, make a note that we can revisit that at some future
Sure.
meeting.
Yes, and it'll be reflected in the minutes.
Okay, so talk to Brad and then my storage. I mean, we could have an emergency meeting just for that, my storage committee if we needed to, you know. When is the date for for the final budget for the commission?
Well, it wouldn't be until the second Tuesday of the month, or the third Tuesday of the
Okay,
month.
so we would be, because we would be meeting on the 14th of December is our regularly scheduled. But we could meet before that if we needed to, if I can get a quorum, so.
No, it seems like that would line up for that 19th when the final budget would be approved, so it seems like we could.
That would be okay.
Slip that revenue increase in at your, after your regular meeting.
Okay,
Thanks again for considering that. and taking
sure,
that on.
sure.
But I think the question to ask search and rescue is, if they were billing for every single rescue they do, the ones that are in Sans Labs, how much does that come to?
Right.
And I think that's the number Sans Labs can contribute.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to, I could as well reach out to the search and rescue commander and sort of, give them background into why we're interested in it and sort of why a really thoughtful calculation of what those what that contributed time is important to the county and to the funding of everything we need to fund.
Do you have the funds available to increase that number?
Some, yeah, I mean, if we're looking at like 50 probably, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, 15 maybe. 15 probably wouldn't be any problem.
You've got a fund balance and the fees are going up, so.
Right, but we do have some projects there too, so, yeah.
Okay.
Right, no, it would be good to see.
Good discussion.
I mean, those costs could be variable though. I mean, some rescues are gonna be more expensive some years than others. But as far as like labor and equipment, yeah, that would be a set number. I mean, for that year, it'd be good to look at, could look back a few years.
We need to do an estimate, or it could be some kind of, base bill of sample that's each year for the actual.
Oh. I don't know. I don't know what kind of numbers we're looking at. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they're spending.
So there's this $10,000 request in here for capital equipment, because you already described that this has been budgeted for
This year.
this year for some new vehicles, but then there's a 10,000 request here in 24, and that's related to after hours fee collection. We talked about that service that you're exploring. Do you want to just talk about that after hours fee
Yeah,
connection?
I don't have any pictures of it with me, but the BLM has 3 or 4 of them now. And the first one I think went up at Horse Thief, and it's you can pay with your credit card, it's like a kiosk, and you go over there and you can you get a receipt, and they have it for Horse Thief for camping.
I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah, well, so the reason I'm not positive if we're gonna do it or not is some of my staff doesn't feel it's worth it. But what's different is we have a lot of presence, so we're in the entrance station during the busy time from, 8 to 5 or even longer on both ends at times, depending on the day of the week. And when we open that pipe safe in the morning, we're only pulling out like at the most $200. So you have to pay like a monthly fee to this company.
So this 10,000 startup, do you have an idea of what the ongoing annual cost of that would be?
Well, for the first year, it would cover it. It's gonna cost, I think it's about $2,500, 2,000. It's two, hold on. Yeah, it's about 2,500 a year for the monthly fee.
Okay.
But they have a startup fee of like the unit, and then they have to come down and I mean, even though we pour the concrete pad, they install it, get it all going. So that was around 6 to 7,000. So.
Because right now you just have an Iron Ranger for off
Right,
hours collections.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do have online payment though with Square
Mhm.
for after hours for day use, but not for camping. And we wouldn't use it for camping anyway, because we are first come for, well, we could, we have to, that's what I'm saying, there's details. I just
Yeah.
wanted to put it there and then we'll get it figured out better.
Yeah.
Because we are first come, first serve, right now, if you go to online Square, you can only pay for day use, because we don't want someone going on from our website, in, Iowa or whatever, and thinking that they've reserved camping, and then they didn't. So you can only pay for day use. You can't pay for camping
Mhm.
with the online. Now, the way that one unit is set up at Horse Thief, that's what it is. It's for the campground.
Yeah. And so you're just continuing to analyze whether this upfront and ongoing cost would be justified or offset by increased after hours collections.
Mhm.
Because this is just basically a really easy card tap for someone
Right.
pulling up to the after hours. booth.
Right. But the online Square payment isn't that bad either. So it's kind of like, okay, it's a more obvious thing. So would they
Mhm.
be more apt to pay, or those people that aren't gonna pay when we're closed anyway? Because like I said, I think first I'm gonna, well, anyway, we're gonna explore it more. I mean, I've thought also about like, well, maybe we should just improve some of our signage too, because there's certain, or I don't know, there's a percentage of people that say, oh, I didn't see it. It's like, how could you not see it? But they don't want to see it. But overall, we do have very good compliance up there. So it's just a matter of, is it worth it, and paying those fees every year, and they can change and go up. For the BLM, it's definitely worth it, because they were counting thousands of dollars by hand once a week. They were counting like $20,000, like 4 people sitting in the office, like once a week, taking up most of their, good percentage of their day. We're counting, we're doing it every day as a regular thing. So I don't know, but I'd like to put the money in there so we can have it as an option and then really dive into it, explore it, and see if it's gonna be worth it.
Okay, and then we talked about, there's this $2,000 request in inventory office equipment. That's an increase from 1,000, and that's for some increased technology capabilities in the conference room at your admin office there on 100 North.
Right, we wanna have a TV screen and a camera, so we wanna be able to do our Zoom meetings and everything from there for stewardship. And then I know that Maddie and Anna Sprout, Maddie Wogwitz and Anna Sprout would really want to be using it. So we're going half and half on the cost. And Anna, Maddie had a quote from a few years ago when she was thinking of doing this, and the costs have gone really down. So it was good to wait, because screens are a lot cheaper.
Mhm.
Yeah, technologies.
And then it looks like all the other requests for 2024 are identical to what was approved in
Yeah, I did.
2023 for the most part. Did you have any other expense lines that you wanted to talk about? I mentioned how active trails and transportation may contribute to utilities for your admin office. I didn't talk about this landscaping line. Do you want to, that's up from 3,000 to 4,000?
Yeah, we just want to do some xeriscaping in the front yard. When I had that modular built, custom built for us and improved a lot so we could bring it in and everything, I had always planned to do some landscaping out front. It's just been on the back burner. So it'd be nice to get that done. And did you talk about my big ones there?
I did open up, but I just explained that those were, I explained the grant matches and what those grants were for, and the multimodal path, and
Okay.
yeah, I covered them. Sorry I did it without you.
Sorry.
I'm glad I had some awareness, glad we did the appropriate amount of legwork for me to be able to stand in there. One thing that I think I failed to include in, there's that again. One thing I think I failed to include in here and I do apologize, is you did come up with calculations for projections for
Oh, yeah.
revenues. Can we do that on the fly here?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I have
great.
it here.
So we can
Um,
just explain a little bit what each of these lines that are active, Sand Flats fees, online fees, those are the.
Right, so the online fees is recreation.gov.
Okay,
And those are for the group campsites.
okay,
And I'm gonna go with a low number on this. You know, Chris had budgeted like 93,000 or something for this year, 95,000.
95, yeah.
But you know, we're only at 30, well, now we're at 38 right now. We're down like 19%. So, compared to last year, there was a lot of refunds because of the cold spring is what it looks like. And hot summers, our summer was, you know, cooler than usual for June, but, we seem to have a lot of cancellations this year. Maybe it was where they weren't taking vacations or something, people that would plan to come to us. So, last year we brought in like 76, I think it shows there for 2022. And Chris had put in 92,000 almost. So I was just gonna put in 60,000. I mean, maybe we'll reach.
So I would assume that the recommendation was to set it at 95 because of those 21 actuals and perhaps the expectation that it would
But that was
rise
a big
again
year,
to
yeah.
somewhere in there, but it, you know, looks like maybe we're more slowly approaching back to that kind of number.
I don't know, we're down right now compared to last year. So we had 76 last year, but we're, right now, I think we're only gonna make 60 this
Okay.
year unless something changes. So,
So you're proposing putting 60 in here?
yeah.
Oh, and it's a negative, right? I think I missed that on the weeds one. Sorry, everyone. Okay, and then Sand Flats fees in general, can you explain what all goes into there?
Yeah, I think that's what we collect at the entrance station and online with those square purchases when we're closed. Or if they're coming up to the booth and they see our signs and they go online or they go on our website the day before or something. So 890,000 was what I was thinking, and I was using last year's revenue, because right now we're actually down 4% compared to last year through August, but we did increase the fees, which went into effect August 15th. So hopefully we'll, you know, we should, remember when we met, I was talking, we're probably bringing about $30,000 more. But anyway, I'm going with last year's and 175,000 on top of that, which is what we expect to, I mean, I'm rounding it, but what we expect to bring in with our fee increase. And those were calculations I did as part of my business plan. So they were based on 2019 numbers when I came up with that 175,000, but that's what I used for everything for the business plan was 2019 numbers. So that puts us at 890,000 for bringing in for the fees. Yeah. And then 15,000 grant, if that all comes through, we don't know yet. I had Jennifer Jones was at my stewardship committee meeting and they just haven't heard yet what's happening with that because the person that had done that had been in that position for like 20 years, moved to a different position. And so it kind of fell to the wayside for a while, but
What
they're catching
line
up.
would that go in?
That's the 3317. That's the youth initiative grant.
Okay. Would you be comfortable with me putting in 15?
Yes, I would put in 15 and then if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Oh, then it's a negative.
I bet it will happen though. Usually comes through.
And
I
then
don't
we-
think we've ever been denied and we've been getting them for probably 10 years. If you know, some years we didn't have it, but yeah.
And I don't recall talking about this expense reimbursement line, but what,
So that is being, so some of the outfitters used to buy maps from us because they wanted like boxes of them. So, I mean, we pay to print them, so I would sell them to them for
Mhm.
what we paid.
Okay.
And then, but now they're printing their own or something. They don't seem, they have nicer versions they're giving to their rental customers. So, but we also sell our plant books at Back of Beyond and Moab Made. And so that's just an idea of what, now it's really, we used to sell a lot at Dead Horse, but after our last printing, we had to raise the prices because we actually get the prison to print them for us. So it had to go, it went up a little bit, what they needed for those costs. So when we did that, Dead Horse didn't want to sell them anymore. So
Should
that's
I-
why
should
it's
I-
500,
Okay,
because there's less places. We don't make very much on those books. We only make about $4. And they retail for around 30, but then the printing is 20 something, and then they take their part. And then, but anyway, they're beautiful books, so they're out there for the public to enjoy.
and actually one other expense line that I wanted to talk about that I didn't. There is this line here that would just be, just so everyone in the board and anyone watching in the public, it's I don't know if we've encountered this yet in any other department presentations, but there's this 40,920 that's budgeted as an expense for sand flats. And because they are their own fund, this is the contribution that Sand Flats makes to the general fund to make up for administrative burdens that the county takes on account of Sand Flats Recreation Area. And so that's that accounting bookkeeping line that.
And Chris, you worked with Chris Baird on those in the past, right? On that, because it cost money for us to process our cash.
Yeah, I came up with some estimates on what the expense was for the banking side. Yeah.
And then I think it included HR.
expense and an IT. I feel like there was.
Oh,
an
it does
IT.
include IT? Oh, that's good. I wasn't
I'm not
sure.
100% about that, but.
I remember Chris Baird telling me it was the treasurer's office and the clerk's office for processing our bills and our time cards and HR and I don't remember IT, but the IT should be in there. We should, so
All right,
I was not part of how Chris Baird came up with that number, so, I mean, obviously, Chris Kaufman knows his part of it, but I don't know how how the other parts were decided.
and it appears that it was recalculated in 2020 and increased.
Yeah, it always used to be for years, it was 5,000,
Yeah.
and at that time, my impression was it just went to the clerk's office. That's what I was told by Diana Carroll, was it was going to the clerk's office for our bills and our.
Okay, well, I might do some work with the other clerks. I don't know why I keep changing that.
I
Might do
think
some
the
work.
travel council has that line
Yeah.
item, and I think that Bill Jackson might have that line item.
Correct, yeah, I know the roads department definitely does. Yeah, it might be something that's worth me exploring with when I get in with my clerks to see how often, or, identify other counties that might do a similar thing and see how often that they recalculate those items, because obviously
It's been a few years.
this doesn't reflect, this sort of flat trend doesn't reflect the sort of the ongoing increasing costs that the county incurs and for general, things.
Right, right.
So, yeah, that will be worth looking into. Any questions from the board for Andrea?
You mentioned the stewardship committee, so suppose they want to spend the budget one way, the county approves something different, who ends it? They'll have to approve it?
I think you guys win.
Okay.
They're advisory.
Okay, so in that case, why were we worrying about the meeting for us to approve that?
I guess just procedural. I mean, it's always been that I've gone to them first and they've,
There wasn't like a legal reason to do it.
well, I don't know. It's in the agreement between the BLM and the county that this advisory group will look at it. And the other people that are in that advisory group, there's the 4 citizens, but then there's also the BLM, Jennifer Jones, and then there's also Evan Clapper from the commission. So there's a commission person and there's a BLM person. And that's really the only time that the BLM looks at our budget. I mean, they look at it every quarter. I mean, those 4 times a year is when they look at our budget quarterly. So it's definitely a big part of that agreement is overseeing that budget. Because I think that was really important when it was, I mean, it's always important, but when it was first set up. They
Yeah.
wanted to be sure, because it was such a unique thing to collect money on federal land. It was before the fee demo program. For it to be collected on federal land and go to the county, they really needed to have oversight.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Andrea.
Sure.
Appreciate you coming in.
Good job.
Oh, no, it's perfect, it's perfect, it's perfect. It is not cold.
It's cold.
It's winter.
Harry?
It's winter, sweater, it's perfect.
So I
Yeah,
can say
I
with
was
this.
just worried about the procedure, I just.
Yeah, they just didn't want to vote, they wanted to have any new information. They didn't want to come up with a number. It's the main thing, so.
Right, we have, moving on to our next department presentation, we have the Grand County Public Library. And here with us is Library Director Carrie Valdez. Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, we'll start by looking at the revenue lines associated with the library.
Gabe, do you mind if I just take half a second?
Please.
Just explain a couple of things, just so everybody, I think most of you know, Bill, I'm not sure if you do, so I just want to make sure everybody knows. So first of all, the library is not funded by the general fund. We are our own taxing entity, so we are a line when the citizens get their property tax, but we are not an enterprise fund like Sandplatz, like we don't generate our own revenue. So we are a tax-funded entity, but we are not part of the general fund. So I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
that part's clear before we kind of get into it, because following Andrea, I think it could get a little
So just
confusing.
to follow up, that, who decides what the library property tax rate is? Is that the county or?
So there is a state code. So I have a library board. There is a commission representative on that board. And then there's state code that the library board recommends, that's the wording in the code, a budget to the commission. But the commission has the final say on what the budget is, how,
So, like the person, so if one were to go through truth and taxation, it would be the county. not the
that is
library.
correct. Yes. Yes, library board is also advisory, as Andrea was talking about, the stewardship.
And so then I believe because of the issues with centrally assessed that we're having, is not the county on the hook for the portion of that lawsuit judgment that we lost to pay back? Because,
Well, you're not on the hook for our part, like we're on the hook for our part, the library, but it's the county, it is a county fund.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
but that,
yes.
that isn't coming in without raising your tax rate, why
That's
then
correct,
that
sir.
then pushes it onto the county.
Yes, that is correct, sir.
And to be clear, I don't need to dominate the conversation as far as the presentation of your budget. You know, I usually do that because department heads typically appreciate when I kind of lead it on. But if you want to take leadership, I'm happy to see.
Well, I didn't bring my glasses.
Right.
You know, I'm looking over there going, well, it's kind of yellow, but I do have my numbers in front of me. Mine's relatively straightforward, quite honestly, because we are library funded. Part of that state code tax funded, but we are our own fund, not part of the general fund, as I was mentioning earlier. Any monies that are not, like, the library fund cannot be by state code used anywhere else for any other purpose. So that's in state code. However, the general fund or TRT or any of that could provide library service. It has just historically been funded by property tax, just as a line item. And so when we're talking about some of my line items, for example, I have, I think it's 840, it's called grant match. This is 100% a contingency fund. And Chris Baird used to hate contingency funds.
I do too.
Okay, I agree, but in my defense, you know, that is there. If we don't use it, it just rolls over and it stays in the library fund. So it becomes part of the fund surplus if there's a surplus, or it's not expended if we're if we're overexpending. But I need it if I have a grant opportunity that requires a match. And if I don't have that budgeted in there, then we have to go back in, open up the budget, do all that. If it's just there, I use it if I need it, I don't if I don't. And it doesn't affect any other department or any other fund because it's all library, if that makes sense. And so that's some of that is somewhat contingency, but I hate using that word because I get yelled at every time.
You're given that grace because it's your budget and you've shown to be competent in operating your running your budget.
So for the most part, you know, the entire library budget is contingency. If I need it, I use it. If I don't, I don't, but it doesn't affect any other department or any other fund. So historically, what we've done throughout the years I've been here is we'll raise property taxes. And then we'll be static for 4 to 5 years, and then we'll raise property taxes again. And we'll be static for 4 to 5 years, and we'll raise property taxes. So the last time that taxes were raised was in 2019 for the 2020 budget. And now we're coming up on 2023 for 2024, so it's been about 4 years. It hasn't been about, it has been 4 years since there was any kind of increase as far as the property tax increase, which we're going to need. We're going to need, or we need to look at other revenue line items. For example, if the general fund wants to throw some money at library, or if the TRT, which I feel is a very appropriate use of TRT, but I've been unsuccessful convincing everybody else of that. Just because our fund surplus is around $400,000. And I think that we're going to find that with this budget as presented, it's going to be less. We're going to expend more than is going to be collected by the current property tax rate.
And as far as going through truth and taxation, there's a pretty significant allowable margin that you can request as an increase through the truth and taxation process. And so there are kind of two different trains of thought, I think, across the state, which is there could be entities, say like the school district, that they basically do a small increase every year. Or, you know, as you described it, it's more the library's pattern has been to maybe wait a few years and do a little bit bigger of an increase.
That is historically how it's been, yes.
And is that, you know, is that a philosophy that works for you, or, you know, you think works for the citizens, or, you know? It's a big question.
That's a lot. I was just getting ready to say, whoo, that's a loaded question. So, okay, I'm just gonna talk. Shut me down when you're done. So obviously, as with every other department, the majority of our expenses are salaries and benefits, right? It's the people that are in the county. I have no control personally over grade and staff or any of that, what benefits are allowed or not. They're county employees. So we've got to go along with what the county's doing, obviously. That makes the most impact on the budget. We can talk about these little increases that I'm showing here, but percentage-wise, they're very small. The issue with trying to do what we do, which is this every 4 to 5 years, is it's really hard to kind of look at what salaries and benefits might be in 5 years, right? Like we can make a best guess estimate, I guess, but it's always been kind of year to year with the salaries and benefits, because that's how we get the information. So I don't know. I don't know. We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Whether or not we should, I can't say. I can just say we.
I think it's also worth noting that.
I'm sorry, my back's hurting. I just have to stand up, folks.
No problem at all.
The property taxes, the rate, it isn't indexed for inflation. And so, like a few years ago, when inflation was only about 2% a year, that would make a whole lot of difference. But in recent years, you know, I think that, you know, basically your income's been cut by about 10% because of inflation. So I think you can make the argument that maybe we should be like the school district and at least do a you know, CPI, inflate small inflation adjustment every year, just to, you know, keep the effective spending the same.
So I will state that along that exact line, I had a note here, Megan and I were just confirming numbers when Andrea was speaking, but in 2021, which is the year after we had just increased, we were averaging 450 new items a month that we were able to purchase for the library, like new books, new kids' books, you know, that items for circulation. This year we're at 345 because those collection development line items haven't changed since we went out for a tax increase in 2019 for 2020. And so, you know, that's my budget. So I'm staying within that budget, but it is effectively, there are less services available right now because it's a static number and the inflation has been such an impact on those things over the last few years.
And then you also, I'm not sure if we were going to get to a line that would speak to it, but you also have a facility that, you know, is.
We will talk.
You have a facility.
I do have a facility, and while everybody keeps calling it the new library, and it has been called the new library, I will remind everybody it's been called the new library for almost 20 years. We moved into that building in 2006. So yes, there are things. I'm becoming a great burden on Sean from county maintenance, just because as the building ages, things are happening. So the lifespan on the roof was 20 years. We had the great flood of 2019 where about 25% of the roof was redone, but the other 75% is going to need to be redone before around 2026. So there are two line items here that I'm hoping to get some money as part of the regular budget into the capital projects, so that we can start kind of saving up for when this roof needs to be redone. We just had a monumental HVAC problem that ended up with the library being closed for 2 days because it was inhabitable because it was so hot, because the HVAC wasn't working. We were able to, Sean got that all fixed by repair, not replacement. But if we ever have to replace those HVACs, that's expensive purchasing. So there's capital projects that I'm asking for some money to be part of the budget put into those, and then capital equipment as well.
And so that's 10,000 and 5,000 respectively, that would be transferred into Fund 73 as a way to as a way to plan for those.
Yep, to plan for what is an inevitability. We're gonna have to put some money in that building.
Okay, we have some other, just since we have your expense requests up.
Absolutely.
There are some small adjustments for office supplies and things. I would assume that's just the
Those
sort
are
of
just all related to
normal
inflation.
increases.
Yep,
Teen center rents, did that increase a little bit?
$100 a month.
Yeah, okay. And utilities, we all know those things, just, there's, the data hotspots are included in that line, so I guess
That's correct.
it's worth noting that, that isn't just water, gas, sewer, electricity sort of.
That's
thing.
correct. That's data, yes, data on the circulating hotspots.
And are those still really heavily used and
This morning, there was a 35-person wait list. We have about 100 that circulate.
wow.
What is that?
Data hotspot.
Like mobile internet hotspots that people
So
can check out.
for
Can you-
students and people that are working or whatever that don't have a reliable internet access, you can connect a phone or a laptop or whatever to the hotspot.
Like cellular data you can use.
Well, I have it on my
Oh,
phone.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
But you rent them to people, you should check them out.
Certainly, we had them grant funded and now the
Oh,
grants
that's
are
neat.
coming out.
Didn't know, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we discussed this before, but what's the breakdown of the people who use it? You mentioned students, so. If I'm thinking of who's utilizing this, who should I be thinking of?
That's also a loaded question. Yes, you must have a library card in order to check out a hotspot or anything in the library. So internet access in this community, because we're rural and somewhat remote, is about $80 a month to meet the federal minimum guidelines that they put out as reliable and with no throttling. And it's just cost prohibitive. So, I mean, if you want to talk about like areas of town, like.
No, I guess I was like, is it almost entirely residents, or is it people who are here for a month or two in their van, or?
Well, the people that are here in their vans just park in front of the library. They just use the library's Wi-Fi. No, these are residents
Okay,
of
that's
Grand County. Yes,
Great.
sir. Yes, no, definitely.
And so there's a number of these lines that are just up a little bit. I don't know if you want to, if there's anything exciting you want to talk about like small increases in juvenile collection or adult programs or.
This is all just, as we were mentioning, just trying to get back to kind of, the number of things we were able to buy in 2019, 2020.
Okay. And then there's a requested increase of in inventory from 5,000 approved in 23 to 10,000 for 24.
Yes, so this is fun. So we have publicly available computers where people come in and use our computers at the library if they don't have that kind of services at their house. Meg is here to help me because I will maybe get this wrong. The Windows version that are in the computers that we have at the library for the public to use will no longer be supported after fall of 2025. Yeah, after fall of 2025. And so we are going to have to replace every computer that's in the library. And so I would just like to get a little bit of a heads up of having some, start replacing those computers. So we're not trying to buy, we have 60 public?
Yeah, around that.
I think we have around 60 public computers. I could do the math real quick, but I just don't want to have to buy all 60 at one time. Yeah.
How many are you expecting to buy with the 10,000?
It's an incompatibility.
Yeah, they're gonna stop supporting Windows,
Got it.
whatever we're on right now. That kind of depends. They're $600 to $800 a piece.
Great. Let's see here. Schooling's the same. Children's programs from 6,000 approved in 23 to 9,000 in 24. That sounds like a fun thing to talk about.
That's mostly all focused on teen programming, because we have the teen center now open. We're looking to partner with USU Extension. The school district has their student excellence supports. I don't remember. It's kind of an alternative high school that's in that same building where we're at. And we're just really wanting to do some like adulting type of classes where we're helping young adults, you know, like how do I balance my checkbook? How do I get a credit card? What does it mean to, you know, sign a student loan for, you know, just those type of classes and that they cost.
Okay.
And we haven't really traditionally done that type of teen programming in the past because we lacked the space for noisy teens in the library.
Okay, before circling back briefly to revenues associated with the library, are there any questions from the board regarding the expense requests that the library is proposing here?
I'll make a comment, just that with Carrie and the property tax increase, we did estimate out salary and benefits. I used a placeholder of the 3.2, which I think is what Social Security just recently released as their cost of living adjustment, to kind of help estimate what salaries and benefits might look like for the library, with some deadlines for the property tax update. So that number might change. We haven't discussed our COLA quite yet, so I just want to make a note of that.
And so I guess as far as talking about revenues, I'll start with this. I'll start with this contributions category in revenue, because it describes here, you know, kind of back to the conversation about the property tax increase and how the library is able to sustain itself. There's been a contribution from the library's fund balance to help support the general operations of the library.
Yes.
And so the amount budgeted for this year was 243,000. And how much, after that contribution, how much do you estimate is in your, you shared with me that your tracking indicates $400,000
Around 400,
left.
yeah, if we pull out what is budgeted of 243, there'll be about 400,000 in that fund surplus left. That's always up to, first of all, I think I know that we will underspend this year because I have not been able to stay fully staffed I've tried, I've tried. So my part-time hours are not going to be 100% of what it was. So we won't pull out that full 243. And then that also doesn't take into effect, I wish Chris Kaufman had stayed. That doesn't take into effect new growth that we
Right.
see by the end of this year when they're collecting taxes, I think. So it's very likely that it'll be less than the 243,600 that was budgeted. And so it's, yeah, I just can't say, I just don't know.
So, but still,
You missed the negative sign.
thank you. But but I think it's important to illustrate. So if the expectation is that there's, you know, you might pull somewhere between 150 and $240,000 from the fund balance, and after that, there will be 400 left. You know, that's painting a picture where there's gonna, you know, the fund balance is dwindling
Yes.
pretty rapidly.
Yeah,
And
what tends to happen in those, no, it doesn't tend. Yes, that is what happens in those 4 years in between, 4 to 5 years in between where we do a tax rate increase.
Yeah.
Our fund balance.
And of course, we want to take that action before that goes all the way to zero, and we do have to pull out the general fund to help support.
Well, and there's
the
also
library's
state code, and
operations.
I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but there's state code that requires the library maintain a minimum percentage of a budget within a fund balance, but you can't go over a maximum percentage in the fund balance.
Yeah.
I
No, that's-
apologize, I don't know the percentage, but I know it's in code.
Thank you for mentioning that. Absolutely. donations here, this 4,000, is that just, are those donations collected by the Friends of the library, or is that
No,
just,
if we get money from the Friends, there's another line item
Yeah.
that's there for that. No, that's donations from the community.
just at the can at the desk? or
Yeah, we
something?
have a big jar at the front desk. We have, community members that quite honestly send a check in every week. There's, at the end of this year, when it gets close to Christmas, oftentimes we'll get a few checks in the mail.
And just to display here, there's a nominal amount, even though it's my understanding, is the library fee free?
Overdue fees, there's no overdue fees.
There's no overdue fees, but if you damage or destroy a book, you still that those
Yeah,
in
it's
those
still in
cases.
the-
Yeah,
in the
okay.
fee ordinance.
I just had my own curiosity, do we do a fund balance transfer at the end of the year? To like, that contribution, does that come at the end of the year in the budget amendment?
That's why it's still zero. Yeah.
alright.
Mhm. Yeah, because it'll account for how she's been staffed. and
Sure.
What the new
Sure.
grant figures came in
That
at.
makes sense.
Yep. There's an ILA with San Juan County to serve presumably to serve the folks at the south end of the valley. Is that
Yeah, so
correct?
that's an interlocal agreement. It's usually, it's a 5-year agreement. We signed it last year, renewed it again last year. I think it's been in place for about 10 years or so, maybe 11 years. Yeah, they pay $6,000 a year, and then we provide services to the San Juan County residents that have an 84532 zip code.
Great. And then can you describe what the CLEF grant is?
I can. The CLEF grant is money that comes from the state legislature, so it comes through the state library. It's a grant that is given every year, as long as the state legislature funds it. It's determined, there's a bunch of variables that go into it: population size, library size, local maintenance effort. It's whatever, it's right around $7,500 a year.
Okay. And
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, it's forgave
negatives, yeah, I think I'll probably have to go in wholesale, because I've just
Yeah, I think so.
been so out of practice. I'll just have to assume that I've done that everywhere. LSTA grant, that typically something has come in for that, but it's a pretty variable amount. So you're
Yes.
more comfortable with leaving that at zero and maybe amending for that, is that correct?
We've
or-
always done an amendment with the
Okay.
LSTA grant. So it's a federal grant, it's a competitive grant. There have been years in the past that we haven't gotten an LST at all. There have been years where we've gotten like a 3,000 LST grant. There's been years where we've had $30,000, $40,000, $60,000. Like, it is just impossible to guess ahead of time if that federal grant will be available and if our application will be successful or not.
Okay. And then as far as the conversation about taxes, I think that we'll have a larger conversation led by Treasurer Kaufman about what we can expect to come in, and that'll obviously, and because property tax, let's see, the property taxes that would reflect, let's see, they would show up on collections. Let's see, they would, if you were to successfully go through truth and taxation, they would be, I'm trying to think if they would or wouldn't be factored into this request, or if that would be actually until the following year when that would actually take effect. Do you know what I'm saying?
If I understand you correctly, the answer would be that the truth and taxation process would take place this fall, but then it would be for the 2024 budget.
Okay, yeah, so it would,
That's
it
as
would
I
reflect.
understand it.
Yeah, and so we would budget for that, the increase that you're proposing.
Yes.
Also, I just want to state really quickly, like the LSTA grant, it's negligible on the bottom line, because if we get it, it's for a very specific project. It cannot be used for expenses that are already, so we write a grant application to do some, new ABC thing or something, and then that grant funds it, but
It's restricted funds, really. Yeah.
thank you, restricted funds.
Mhm.
So it'd be in and out, but yeah.
But it's a great way to improve the services of the library, so good on you for pursuing them.
So make the same as the commission meeting link, or is it different?
I think it's the same as the commission meeting link. Is there anyone having problems with it?
Chris was very helpful.
Okay. So any other comments you wanted to make about,
No, but I'm happy to answer questions, although I do understand you've been here all afternoon, so I'm happy to go away too. You just tell me what you want me to do.
Well, I think that'll be all.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Carrie.
Sure, of course.
Mhm. All right, and that concludes our department presentations scheduled for this meeting. I did I did let the board know that I would provide an update on where we are for end of year revenue projections to sort of get a better, clearer picture of where we're looking to round this year out. And sort of in conjunction with that also what we can expect to be, you know, some ideas of what we can expect to be seeing in 24, especially as it relates to revenues. And we are in the process of compiling all of the data necessary to provide for the consultant. And I have been in contact with our contracted consultant about some dates where they're going to come down in person. And I'll make sure to keep the board and the commission apprised of that, so that can be a collaborative process as is needed. I know I had mentioned that this might be the first meeting where we would start talking about that topic. It's looking unlikely that it's looking most likely that the first meeting in October, that would be the 5th of October, the first budget advisory, the budget advisory board meeting on October the 5th would be the most likely, the most likely time, because Cody Dieter, that contracted consultant, is planning on being here in Grant County that day. And so we can have him be present here at the meeting. And by that time, he will have had enough time to do some analysis and make a presentation before the board. So that's the update I wanted to provide there. Any other future considerations or comments? All right, that said, thank you all very much for your participation. I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 3:42 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.